The note was a concise and definitive statement. Dearest Shelley, I am stepping away from our relationship for an undetermined period of time. This is not about you, but rather a new person in my life. I kindly request that you do not attempt to contact me or pursue further communication. This is a decision I have made for personal reasons. My world was suddenly and unexpectedly turned upside down when Shelley, my wife of 21 years, departed. Our relationship began during our early years of schooling, and her absence has left a profound impact on me. I am Joe Mason and my wife is Michelle, but we are affectionately known as Shelley. From an early age, our paths diverged. While I attended various public schools, Shelley pursued her studies elsewhere. However, our collegiate experience brought us together. During our senior year, we took the plunge and moved in together. Post-graduation, we sealed the deal with a summertime wedding. Shelley, with her perky demeanor, blonde locks, and twinkle in her blue eyes, stands in stark contrast to my more grounded brown hair. Haired brown. In terms of my professional identity, I am the proprietor of my own legal practice, with experience in a range of legal matters. Shelley, on the other hand, is a nurse supervisor at a local hospital. We are both 42 years of age and are committed to maintaining our physical fitness through regular gym sessions, hiking, and volleyball. Shelley engages in aerobic dance routines at the gym, while I prefer the intense physical exertion of pounding a heavy bag. This activity serves as both a stress reliever and a source of strength. We have 2 children who are preparing to attend college. James is 19 years old. Additionally, Susan, who recently celebrated her 18th birthday on a sunny day in April, received a letter. I promptly contacted the children and James was the first to answer the phone. He expressed a similar level of shock and disbelief as I did. I assured him that I would keep him informed, and I did. Susan was the next to receive my call. She reacted calmly, though not as surprised as I was. She was still hurt, however, and expressed that she had a feeling something was amiss when she saw her mother chatting with a male colleague during lunch. His name was William Connor. She inquired about his identity, but did she suspect something was going on? Susan had her reservations but did not voice them. Now, she is preoccupied with self-reproach for not speaking up earlier. I reassured her that there was no need to worry. I informed her that I had already taken care of the situation and that she should focus on spending time with her family. I then conducted an online search for information about this Connor individual. My findings revealed that he is a physician who previously worked at Shell's Hospital. He is currently 40 years old, divorced, and has transitioned from a cardiologist to an administrator. However, there is an intriguing twist in the tale. He is alleged to have performed an operation 3 years ago that resulted in the death of the patient. He is described as tall, blonde, and strong in his photograph, but when I attempted to ascertain more recent information about him, I was unable to do so. Consequently, I requested assistance from my friend Bill James, who is adept at locating information online. He agreed to notify me if he discovered any pertinent details. I examined our financial records and discovered that she had not utilized the checking account, but her regular deposit was not forthcoming this month. Additionally, she had withdrawn the majority of our savings, amounting to approximately $200. I contacted Bill again and requested that he track the transaction, providing him with the account details. I then contacted Vanguard regarding the withdrawal, which they informed me was still in process. The representative assured me that he would respond shortly. Our house was owned jointly and valued at approximately $800. 000. It is possible that Shell had a plan in mind, or that she was not only engaging in infidelity but also theft. I drove to her parents' house, approximately 30 meters away, on Wednesday. Both cars were parked outside. Mark and Sally Benton had worked with my parents at GMG Enterprises for years. They used to socialize more when I was younger. I never had any issues with them and believed they had raised their daughter well until today. I was aware that Shelley was close to her mother. I proceeded to the front door and knocked. Mark greeted me and was not surprised to see me. He then led me to the kitchen in the back where Sally was seated at the table with a glass of water. I inquired about the situation with Mark. Sally was aware that Shelley was heading down a dangerous path, and we had discussed it. However, we had agreed not to inform you. Sally, until she had a chance to speak with you directly, she did not afford me any opportunity to do so. She depleted our savings. I may have to consider pressing charges against her for theft unless she repays half of it promptly. I am quite displeased with her and her partner, Joe. There was no necessity for such language. Sally interjected, stating that she was not truly angry. She believes he is her soulmate. What about you? He is, at the very least, a thief of money. I met him on one occasion when she brought him here approximately 1 month ago. She did not provide an explanation as to why he was with her at the time. He was simply introduced as a co-worker. We engaged in a conversation at the conclusion of which I surmised that she was introducing him to her parents at a later point in time. I cautioned her, but it was evident that she did not heed my advice. I assume you are aware of her whereabouts. It is not our place to divulge this information to you, Joe. She is concerned about how you will react. Sally, Mark, I will find her, and in the interim, she has identified a correct assessment of my emotional response, which was similarly problematic in the previous instance. My telephone rang at that moment, and it was Bill. He informed me that Shelley and Connor had obtained employment at a medical facility in Pittsburgh and had leased an apartment in the vicinity. They had established a joint bank account, but the $200,000 had not yet been deposited. Bill hypothesized that it might be located offshore, in which case he could still trace it, but it would entail a financial cost. He promised to keep me apprised of developments. Mark and Sally observed the conversation. During the telephone conversation, I noted the hospital, bank and apartment addresses in a notebook. Additionally, Bill provided me with their cell phone numbers, which I did not record. Instead, I recalled that I did not wish for them to be aware of that information. Sally inquired whether I would accept her return if she were to desire a reconciliation. However, she has demonstrated a strong inclination towards a complete separation, including a lack of communication. It is uncertain whether she will return, except perhaps for money is likely to be a motivating factor in her decision to return to Joey. However, the duration of her absence is unclear. It is possible that she has already apologized, although this cannot be confirmed. If she has, then counseling may be a viable option. However, the longer she remains with another man in a marital-like relationship with him, the more challenging it will be to reconcile. Sally became emotional during this conversation. Mark offered a comforting gesture. I then took my leave, returning to my office. Bill called again, mentioning Vanguard. The transfer of the $200K was temporarily suspended due to potential fraud concerns, despite the account being a joint one. The funds had not yet been released, and there appeared to be some irregularities in the transaction. I conveyed the information I had been given when I called them, and upon calling back, I emphasized that the withdrawal was inappropriate. They explained that it had been halted due to a number of anomalies in the process. I requested that a colleague in my office draft and an emergency TRO was filed against Vanguard, Connor, and Shelley. The process took approximately an hour, after which I filed the document electronically. This should delay the theft for a period of time. A TRO is a temporary restraining order, often accompanied by an application for a permanent injunction. I contacted my parents in Oregon, where they were retired, to inform them of the situation. They expressed surprise and sympathy. I then considered what further action I could take. It is also important to note that adultery is not a crime in Pennsylvania, but it is a misdemeanor in Virginia. I allowed this information to sink in and then sought advice, as I often do with difficult problems. I called my mentor, Uncle Jed, who is my mother's older brother and lives near us in Washington, D.C. He used to be a lawyer but retired a few years ago. However, to me, he was more than just a source of legal advice, he was a repository of wisdom on a variety of topics. I inquired about visiting him and we set up dinner plans. I decided to bring a fancy pizza and beer to his place while waiting. I called a private investigator I knew. I had asked him to find out how long Shelley and Connor had been involved intimately. It was possible that it had been happening for a while. I tried to recall if I had noticed any signs from Shelley lately. That should have alerted me. I had noticed some. I had recently concluded a lengthy trial that lasted 4 months. We had obtained a favorable verdict and were in the process of negotiating the final details. During the course of this trial, which spanned approximately 6 months, including preparation, I had not devoted much attention to Shelley. We had maintained contact with sex, but that ceased approximately 1 month ago. I should have recognized the change sooner, as her responses and the frequency of our interactions, regardless of her schedule, remained consistent. I derived pleasure from the physical intimacy with Shelley. It was not my first lengthy trial. After a few weeks, things usually settled into a routine, and I was less preoccupied at home on the way to Jed's house. I stopped by a clinic to get tested for STDs. Then, I picked up the pizza and beer. Jed welcomed me at his door, the same one I remembered from my childhood. It was the same house his last partner had left about a year ago. He had been married for 40 years to a woman named Ellen, who had passed away from pneumonia 5 years earlier. Since then, he had been involved with a few women, but none for too long. There was nobody there except him. "Well, what brings a busy lawyer like you to a place like this?" he asked. He inquired about my life with her and the significance she had in it. I procured a beverage and informed him I would return shortly. I did as he requested and reflected on the positive experiences we shared. We laughed, raised our children, spent time together, and were intimate as a couple. As I revisited these memories, I found myself silently crying. She was my partner for over 20 years. While we had children, she was the person I loved and trusted the most. Tears streamed down my face. Tears streamed down my face as I reflected on our life together, which had now vanished. How could she have done this to me? I ended up sobbing into my sleeve. Jed returned with 2 shot glasses and some whiskey. He simply let me cry. He poured the drinks when he downed his shot. I did the same. It was good stuff. It helped take my mind off things. I attempted to divert my attention to more positive matters, observing that he was quite intelligent. I inquired as to whether he desired her return. He replied that he wished to regain his previous life, but that this did not appear feasible. He was uncertain as to whether he wanted her back, citing the possibility of further harm and the uncertainty of survival. I suggested that he needed time to process his emotions and that he might require assistance in doing so. I merely facilitated your catharsis, but you may require more comprehensive assistance than I can provide. Moreover, I have not experienced much success since Ellen. However, you will undoubtedly benefit from some action. Nevertheless, it is insufficient when you have had the full package. We spent 2 hours reminiscing about our marriages. He shed tears as well, but Ellen was gone forever. As for Shelley, it was difficult to determine whether he could bear to be with her again. As our lengthy conversation drew to a close, I was overcome with a profound anger, so intense that I feared I might collapse. I rose to my feet and stumbled. In the exterior environment, I initiated a series of aggressive physical actions directed towards an aged, substantial bag suspended from a tree in the backyard. I was overwhelmed by an intense anger, more profound than any I had previously experienced. This anger was directed exclusively towards Shelley. I struck her face and body with repeated punches and kicks. Jed, who was situated on the porch, later disclosed that he had considered contacting emergency services. Before he could dial, the bag fell from the tree, propelled by one of my kicks, and flew over the neighbor's fence. I collapsed to the ground, sobbing. Jed assisted me inside, attempting to calm me as much as possible. Despite being physically fit, I was utterly drained, like a limp noodle. I had exceeded my limits by far. After an indeterminate period of time, he helped me to the couch and covered me with a blanket. I slept through the night. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee. I rolled off the couch, stood up unsteadily, but managed to get my bearings. I was famished, so we ate bacon, eggs, and toast together. Then I proceeded to the shower, discarding my clothes and borrowing a sweatsuit from Jed. I shaved, shampooed, and attempted to refresh myself. My hands were sore and raw, so I applied antiseptic and bandaged them. Shelley, who had been a nurse, had taught me what to do. My body was sore all over, and I had a cut above my right eye. I used a butterfly bandage. My appearance was such that I might have been in a brutal fight and lost. It had been approximately 24 hours since I had read the note that Jed had given me, which contained the name of a marriage counselor he had used previously, Mary Stevens. He believed that she could help me to sort things out. He also mentioned that marriage counseling did not necessarily require both parties to attend. I accepted the card and drove home, changed into work attire, and headed to the office. My appearance was noticed by several people. The staff, who regarded me with curiosity, were convened for a team meeting. There were 12 employees in attendance, including 4 other lawyers. I informed them of the circumstances that had transpired and stated that I might be less accessible until the matter was resolved. We arranged for substitute counsel to assist with some of my responsibilities in my office. I was able to accomplish a significant amount of work, surprising myself with my productivity. I had lunch at my desk and continued working assiduously throughout the afternoon until 5, the time was 30 p.m. I proceeded to leave for my residence. Shelley had already removed a number of her belongings, but the majority of her personal items remained in the house. I visited Lowe's and procured boxes and tape. I then proceeded to pack Shelley's belongings, including her clothes, books, photo albums, and shoes, into boxes and stored them in the garage, as her vehicle was no longer present. I informed Bill that Shelley's vehicle was located elsewhere. I then proceeded to go through the house and remove all photographs of Shelley, placing them into a trash bag along with their frames. I reflected on the situation and prepared a microwave meal before retiring for the evening. I was preparing to retire for the night when I decided to examine our home computer and her cellular telephone, which was charging the computer. The computer contained her emails, but they did not yield any useful information. Her telephone showed calls to a 540 area code that commenced approximately 6 weeks prior. There were also text messages, both to and from Connor, also known as Bill or Billy. The text messages arranged lunch dates and meetings before work, but nothing that could be construed as incriminating. I retired for the night on Friday and returned to work the following day. The day's events had provided me with a measure of solace, and this proved to be the case once again after lunch. The private investigator called and informed me that he had positioned himself at a lunch spot that was frequented by women from Shelley's department. He had simply listened in, as he had no new information to share. The private investigator positioned himself at a lunch spot frequented by women from Shell's department and simply listened in. Unsurprisingly, the disappearance of the boss and the attractive doctor was a hot topic of discussion. There had been intense speculation about the two before they vanished. One staff member claimed to have seen them leaving a motel one afternoon while another witnessed them kissing outside a nearby restaurant. Overall, the staff was convinced they were involved romantically. The private investigator obtained paperwork from the motel showing 3 afternoon room rentals in the weeks before. Shelley departed, having paid for the items in question with copies of receipts and license plate numbers, including 2 of hers and 1 not hers. This prompted me to scrutinize Connor's finances, prompting me to inquire as to why he had not contributed. I contacted Bill again, who took approximately 2 hours to ascertain that Connor had faced severe financial problems approximately 10 months prior to their relocation. He was behind on his mortgage, car payments, and credit cards, and his hospital salary was being garnished due to divorce and overdue child support. I came to the realization that the situation may have been financially motivated on his part, particularly with regard to the $200. Initially, I felt sympathy for Shelley, but then frustration overwhelmed me. I struck a nearby office chair with a forceful blow, causing a commotion. My assistant peeked in to check on me, and I apologized. I then scheduled an appointment with the marriage counselor and visited the office of a family law firm, requesting to speak with Mildred. Hoover was the most suitable divorce lawyer in the area, and she was available to meet with me. During our conversation, I explained the details of the situation. I learned that the temporary restraining order TRO was set for the following Monday, and Shell had already been served at her place of employment in Pittsburgh. I did not require the assistance of Mildred for that particular matter, my firm could handle it. However, I sought her advice on other matters. In regard to the anticipated outcome of the divorce proceedings, she conducted an in-depth examination of the financial data and devoted a considerable amount of time to research on her computer. It appears that the outcome may not be as unfavorable as initially anticipated. The prenuptial agreement provides a degree of protection for your law practice, as she will receive half of the value of the house and half of the assets acquired during the marriage. It is probable that the majority of the assets will be retained, although she will still have sufficient resources to maintain a comfortable standard of living. Let us refine this proposal further. We will await the outcome of the TRO hearing, but proceed with the preparation of the documents, including the allegations of adultery and any other pertinent issues. On that evening, I consumed a microwave pizza and engaged in a lengthy run at approximately 9 o'clock. On the 30th, I contacted Susan, who responded just before the call was diverted to voicemail. I inquired about her well-being and general condition, and she replied that she was fine but wanted to know if I had spoken with her mother. I informed her that I had indeed done so but had promised not to divulge the details. Susan then expressed her frustration, stating that her mother had informed her that she was required to attend court on Monday with either a lawyer or her own representation. She also mentioned that her mother was upset about the situation. I filed a stop payment on the joint investment account to prevent further transactions. I am uncertain, however, if your mother was aware of this action. Is she currently in a secure environment with the aforementioned individual? She appeared distressed and I am unsure of her safety. Ultimately, it is her decision. She has the option to leave if she feels threatened. Why do you inquire about this? There was a disturbance in the background and I could not discern the conversation. However, it seemed angry. Your mother mentioned this. I am hopeful that there is nothing to be concerned about. There is not much that can be done from this point onward. We discussed her school and a new friend she had made and then terminated the call. I had a restless weekend. Monday was significant with the TRO in the morning and a counseling session in the afternoon. I spoke with James, who had not heard from his mother. Later, I went to the gym, where I encountered Shell's friend, Clara Barton, a nurse. Clara attempted. I had hoped to avoid such a confrontation, but I was able to intercept her. I am not interested in discussing this with you, as I do not believe it would be productive. You were aware that she was making poor decisions. Clara, why did you not inform me? You said you would react poorly and might become violent. I am more her friend than you are, so I am in a better position to assess her honesty. What about this Connor? Is he a source of trouble? I believe he is, but I cannot be certain. I warned her about him. However, she was. I regret that she was receiving the level of intimacy she desired. She believed she was in love with him and that he was her soulmate. I was informed of this by her mother. I believe she should have discussed the situation with me instead of disappearing without explanation. I anticipate that she will return soon. He is not her soulmate, and this situation will resolve itself if you are patient. However, I do not believe it will resolve itself. She has made her decision, and she cannot return to me. Clara, she exhibited a certain degree of physical attractiveness in her workout attire. I allowed her to discern my gaze when she resumed her exercise routine. We exchanged smiles and I observed her from behind as she exercised. She became aware of my gaze in the mirror and smiled as she increased the treadmill speed, which accentuated her physique. I blew her a kiss and departed, but I retained the encounter in my memory. My mind wandered to the possibility of being single again soon. There was no harm in preparing for that eventuality. The pleasant interaction with Clara lifted my spirits. I became aroused thinking about her. It had been a while since I had sex due to the dry spell with Shelley. I wore loose gym shorts and took a spot on a leg push machine across the room. I set the weight high and did 3 sets of 12 representatives. I increased the weight, and Clara got off the treadmill and approached me. We locked eyes as I lifted a heavy stack of weight 3 times, which was a challenging task. After the last set, I lay there, breathing heavily, observing her. I surmised that I had stimulated her in some way. She said, "I see something you like," while eyeing my crutch. I was unsure if I did or not. She then proposed a compromise. She would shower at my place across the street, and I could meet her out front. She added that there was no need for me to bring my own belongings, as she would retrieve them from my house. Clara, a woman in her late 30s, was of medium height with a tight, curvy body. Her brown hair and hazel eyes contributed to her conventionally pretty appearance. She had been divorced for some time, and it was evident that she was a potential rebound partner for me. I immediately stood up from the bench and followed her out of the door. There were only 2 other people in the vicinity, a man and a woman who regarded us with interest as we departed. All of us were smiling. Clara guided me across the street to an apartment building, up to the 2nd floor. The view on our way up was stunning. She was giggling and swaying seductively. Opening, she gestured for me to enter, and I did so, glancing around briefly. She approached from behind, turned me around, and pulled me close, tilting her head up. We kissed passionately, and she pressed her body against mine, her tongue exploring my mouth. Breaking the kiss, she gasped, "I always wanted you, but you were the boss's husband. Now I'm going to have you. I'm all yours." I chuckled and began undressing eagerly as she revealed her toned body, and we gazed at each other passionately. We explored each other on the bed, reaching intense climaxes together, and then collapsed in exhaustion after a short while. She then made an exclamation of admiration, remarking, "Oh Joe, how quickly can you get ready again?" She then proceeded to question the nature of her experience, asking if it was truly incredible. I replied that the answer to her question came about 60 seconds later when I became aroused again. She then climbed on top of me and rode me, kissing me deeply. After some gentle foreplay, she increased the intensity of her movements, and I matched her level of arousal. We reverted to a state of passionate closeness, with her assuming the dominant role. I was not opposed to this, and once again, we reached climax almost simultaneously. She then collapsed onto me. I subsequently fell asleep for a period of time until I was roused by the woman. She informed me that I needed to retrieve my belongings and bring them to her. She also stated that I could shower at her residence. Given the lack of illumination outside, I proceeded to dress and promptly made my way to retrieve my clothes. After placing them in my bag, I returned to the woman from earlier. Upon my departure, I smiled and replied, "Yes, thank you for asking." I proceeded to Clara's residence, where I found her to have already taken a shower. I followed suit and donned a fresh pair of gym shorts from my bag. Clara had chosen to wear a terry robe, which I knew I would be removing later. "I require sustenance and alcoholic beverages," she stated, opening the refrigerator to retrieve 2 bottles of pale ale from the freezer. She then removed a pizza from the oven and set the timer. We opened the beers and began consuming them. "Do you truly intend to sever all ties with her?" In that moment, I was uncertain. Perhaps it was premature, but my time with you might have altered my outlook. You are suggesting that if she did it, I could too. I am proposing that being intimate with you might persuade me that it is time to move on. Why does everyone assume she will want to return? She must have the desire to do so. She considered leaving, contemplating the possibility that she might realize soon that she's made a mistake. Then, perhaps she'll gather the courage to ask for another chance. However, there is also the possibility that she might not. She might feel too ashamed to do so. One thing is clear, she's been having an affair with this guy for a while. I don't know if I can forgive her. It is likely that our relationship has reached its conclusion. I am unable to envisage any statement she might make that would persuade me otherwise. Nevertheless, I am certain that, regardless of what may occur, you can always find solace here, and I will ensure you enjoy a pleasant time. That is my promise. By the time I had finished my beer, the pizza had arrived. We consumed it in just 15 minutes, continuing hour in the evening. She relaxed in an armchair while I brought her to climax multiple times with great passion. We then transitioned to the floor, where she skillfully returned the favor, leading to a moment of profound intimacy as she savored every moment we spent. The night was spent wrapped up in each other, caught in a whirlwind of desire. We woke to the morning light, intertwined and bare. We then proceeded to the bathroom for a quick tooth scrub, sharing a spare brush like old buddies. We then indulged in a steamy shower together, the hot water igniting our passion. Against the cool tiles, the experience was intense and primal, unlike anything I had previously experienced. Afterwards, we prepared a hearty breakfast, still in the nude, as the sensation of the air on our skin felt liberating. Lounging on her couch, we felt fulfilled yet eager. We tentatively reached out to each other, testing the reality of our bond, which we found to be tangible and undeniable. Before long, we found ourselves intertwined once again, this time draped over the back of the couch, our bodies moving in sync with a primal longing. She admitted that she was uncertain about the experience. Her voice exhibited a hint of uncertainty. "I have consistently been drawn to you, but this is beyond what I had previously imagined. It is akin to a tiger seizing its prey." I chuckled, though her words weighed heavily on me. I had not anticipated this. She confessed, her eyes shimmering with a blend of wonder and longing. "However, I desire your company again, immediately. Perhaps, I murmured, uncertain of what lay ahead. It felt like an experiment, a journey into uncharted territory. How long could this fervor last, and could we withstand its intensity? We might just be the most sexually compatible duo on the planet. I reflected. She reflected on the rapid progression of our encounter, questioning its long-term viability. Her voice betrayed a hint of concern, and she wondered if we were truly capable of sustaining such a dynamic. I responded by suggesting that only through experience could we ascertain its durability. My gaze lingered on her desire, which seemed to simmer beneath the surface. With that, we fell back into each other's embrace, the couch barely containing our passion in that moment. Thoughts of the future receded, replaced by the raw, unfiltered passion of the present. I suggested that we freshen up and head over to my place, breaking the silence after our laughter. I needed to change and catch up on some emails. If you sit on the other side of the car, we might just make it there. It's not too far away. Her laughter was contagious, and I was compelled to join in. Moments later, we were both doubled over, rolling on the floor with laughter. When the laughter finally subsided, we decided to give my plan a try, pun intended. Our excitement had calmed down, albeit slightly, as we showered without any further antics, dressed, and composed ourselves. We made our way to my modest home. It was her first time stepping inside, as far as I knew, and she explored. She proceeded to examine each area with keen interest, while I completed some pressing tasks. I also changed into different clothes upstairs, as it was Sunday. We then proceeded to watch the baseball game, which we had recorded. It became evident that she was also a keen fan, much like me. We observed the game for approximately an hour, experiencing the mounting tension and engaging in brief glances and light touches. Eventually, our mutual desire led us upstairs to the main bedroom, where we engaged in a more intimate and tender connection. It was a rare moment, marked by a mutual climax that left us both breathless. We basked in the afterglow, and Clara's expression changed, tears welling in her eyes. "Joey," she confessed, "I think I'm falling for you." Her voice was filled with emotion, and her tears brought tears to my eyes too. We shared a moment of vulnerability, and eventually, we wiped away our tears, finding solace in the distraction of the baseball game, which was still playing downstairs. I wondered how the game was going, and I said, eager to shift our focus. With that, we returned to the living room, losing ourselves once more in the game together until the end. I prepared. For our evening repast, we prepared a chicken stir-fry. We partook of the meal with some wine, exchanging many tender caresses when we looked into each other's eyes. At that moment, I realized that I had always wanted her by my side. "I'm in love with you," I told her. "I'll fight to keep you." "Joe," she replied, "you don't have to fight. I'm all yours." Later, we returned upstairs and began with gentle lovemaking. However, it quickly turned into passionate, primal sex, repeated several times, even in the morning over breakfast. I mentioned my upcoming court appearance and therapy session. "Maybe I won't need as much," I said. "Therapy is now scheduled, but I will attend if you are still here when I return. I will prepare food again, and I will be here, although likely unclothed." She joked, and after a laugh, I kissed her and drove her home in court along with a lawyer from my firm, Connor. Shelley arrived with their attorney, the Vanguard lawyer, who also attended. Judge Coulson presided. Shelley avoided looking at me while Connor briefly glared before turning away. The Vanguard lawyer outlined their concerns regarding a transfer that was held up due to suspicious computer activity. An unrecognized computer initiated the transfer at 3, the time is 12 a.m. As the account to which the funds were to be transferred did not belong to either of us, the firm ceased the transfer to avoid liability. They were therefore gratified to have obtained the TRO. My attorney stated that the money was jointly owned and transferred without my knowledge or consent, despite my objections. However, he clarified that Shelley had abruptly left me, quit her job, relocated to Pittsburgh, and moved in with William Connor, her attorney. They argued that Shelley had the same right to withdraw from the account as I did, insisting that the money should go to the intended recipient. The judge then questioned the Vanguard representative as to where the money was supposed to be sent. In response, the representative stated that an account in a local bank owned by William Connor was to be used. The judge then inquired as to whether the identity of the individual who had used their computer to make the transfer attempt had been determined. The The representative replied that this was not currently possible. The judge then requested that Shelley be sworn in. Shelley was sworn in, appearing distressed. Connor grasped her arm as the clerk administered the oath, and she struggled to raise her hand but eventually managed to do so. She then affirmed that she would tell the truth. The judge then queried, "Mrs. Mason, are you married to Joseph Mason?" She responded in the affirmative and was then asked, "Were you a joint owner of a Vanguard account with him?" She replied in the affirmative. The judge then asked, "Did you attempt to withdraw $200?" Shelley responded in the negative. She was then asked whether she had made a withdrawal of $200,000 from the account in question the previous week. She paused, looking around the room with evident distress, before replying in the negative. She was then asked whether she had given permission for such a withdrawal. She replied that she had not, explaining that Mr. Connor had asked to borrow $20,000 to settle debts. She had reluctantly agreed to this request and had provided her password, as her computer was out of order and she was therefore unaware of the $200 transaction. "When did you become aware of the amount of the transaction?" The judge pressed, "When I was served." She admitted. The judge then turned to Connor, who reluctantly provided his name and address upon the judge's insistence. The judge inquired about my intentions regarding divorce. My lawyer confirmed that the complaint was prepared and would be filed soon. The judge ordered Vanguard to freeze the account until the family court could assess the assets. The judge ordered that the account be frozen until the family court could assess the assets. He instructed my lawyer to file by the next business day, warning of reconsideration if the filing was not done promptly. I observed Shelley slump into a chair while Connor stormed out. She sat there, burying her head in her hands, once the courtroom cleared out. Only Shell and I remained. The bailiff wanted us to leave so that he could lock up. I guided her into the hallway, but Connor was nowhere to be found, and only a few people passed by. I glanced at Shelley and inquired as to whether she had accompanied him. She looked at me and nodded, indicating that she had. It appeared that she might need to catch a bus back to her new life. I expressed my regret to her. I had assumed that he was my soulmate, a belief that I had conveyed to your parents. However, it seems that I was mistaken. I was foolish to have believed that. Your abrupt note caused me considerable distress and upset. I was deeply hurt and upset by your decision to end our long marriage. I now realize that I was foolish to believe that our marriage could be saved. I want to come back and be your wife. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I am sorry, Shelley, but I cannot accept your proposal. You have been unfaithful to me for months, engaging in secret relationships with other men without even discussing it with me. You have been unfaithful to me in every sense of the word. The positive aspects of the situation can be discussed in greater detail in a more private setting. However, there is the matter of the children, who are not at all happy with the way their mother has treated them. There is a need for a clear and detailed explanation as to why the mother has chosen to end the marriage in such an abrupt and hurtful manner. The mother had believed that her husband was her soulmate. She had also stated that she believed it would be easier for the children if there was a clean break. However, at this moment in time, she is unable to provide a satisfactory explanation for her actions. The mother became extremely upset and began to cry. It was a painful experience for the father to witness her distress. However, I maintained a certain distance. I had effectively terminated our marriage. There were only so many heavy bags in the world. Additionally, there was Clara. She might have been my soulmate. At the very least, she was the most exceptional sex partner I had ever had. I even liked her beyond that. I inquired about Shelley's future plans. I have secured employment in Pittsburgh. I commence my shift tomorrow and I have rent to cover. I have signed a 1-year lease. I will remove Bill from the equation and observe the consequences. Perhaps you will miss me after a while, at which point you can inform me. I might miss you, I suppose, but I would like to comprehend the reasons behind our failure. I am still shocked and confused. I believe that everything was going well, but I was mistaken. I will contact you once I have processed everything. She gave me a brief hug and walked away. I experienced a complex emotional response. She departed in a state of profound sadness, openly weeping, and I experienced a visceral sensation of indignation. I concluded that therapeutic intervention was imperative. I attended an afternoon session at the recommendation of my primary care physician, who suggested that I consult with Mary Stevens, a marriage counselor. Stevens clarified that her expertise was not in psychotherapy, which deals with the intricacies of troubled marriages and their aftermath. She described her approach as one that initially appeared to be somewhat vague and indistinct. The woman, with her graying hair and slight build, moved with the grace of a dancer as she greeted me with a sunny, genuine smile. I was instantly won over. "What brings you in, Mr. Mason?" "Please call me Joe." My wife left me suddenly. She left a short note and moved to Pittsburgh with her new partner. They'd been involved for about a month. "I understand. How have you been coping?" I detailed my initial businesslike actions, followed by sessions with Jed and heavy bag workouts. I admitted to feeling heartbroken and angry, sometimes simultaneously. "You seem to have navigated through common stages of grief and depression, as well as feelings of sadness and anger, these feelings typically experienced in this order, quite rapidly. How are you feeling now?" As an alternative, I will describe my current emotional state. I am embarrassed to admit that I was at the gym, venting my anger through heavy lifting. I approached a nurse, Clara Barton, who I had met through Shelley. I initiated a conversation with her and asked her about Shell's interactions with the doctor at work. I then noticed her and how the use of spandex and other related items led to a rapid escalation of the situation. We ultimately proceeded to her apartment, situated across the street, where we engaged in a frenzy of passion. This has been an ongoing occurrence for several days, continuously occupying my thoughts, including during today's court hearing. Mary Stevens initially appeared shocked, but then she began to smile, a smile I had previously mentioned lacking. "It would appear that you have developed at the very least a sexual attraction to Clara Barton, the nurse." She said this with a hint of laughter and a twinkle in her eye. She then asked, "Do you know the story behind her name and career as a nurse?" I replied that I was not yet aware of the story and that we had not had much opportunity to talk. "I am tempted to inquire further, but that would not be appropriate," she remarked, tilting her head slightly as we sat across from each other, crossing her legs and smiling. I sensed her flirtatiousness to be quite different from the grandmotherly image I had initially perceived. I suspected there was more to the situation than met the eye. "I believe you are demonstrating something for me, illustrating what I have experienced." I observed that her expression shifted, appearing surprised and, I might add, impressed. That is an astute observation, especially coming from a man. "You caught on quickly." "Perhaps I am losing my touch." "You definitely made an impact." I responded by crossing my legs and turning away from her. "I believe I made my point successfully. It is possible that you may be particularly vulnerable to advances from women at this time." She explained, "I am not suggesting that Clara's feelings are not genuine or that your response is not sincere. However, it is somewhat one-sided. I advise you to become better acquainted with her when you have the opportunity to converse. I am confident that we will succeed, Mary." I reassured her that I found her remarks amusing. "You are quite astute, Joe. I understand your perspective. Clara did indicate that she found me attractive, but that there were certain restrictions in place. I recall, however, Joe. I do not wish to impede this relationship, although I am uncertain that I can. I do, however, wish to emphasize that what you are experiencing may extend beyond the typical rebound phase. It could be genuine and lasting. There have been instances of exceptional sexual compatibility, albeit rare. I raised this topic to differentiate your new relationship with Clara from your marriage." "Why isn't my new relationship my choice?" I questioned. "Yes, it is, but I'd like to explore your previous marriage and how it might influence your future behavior." She clarified, "Okay, I understand our marriage seems solid. I loved her. She loved me, we raised our children, and there was minimal conflict in our relationship. I made time for our relationship, especially sexually. Before she left, after a lengthy trial period, we went approximately a month without sexual intercourse. Both of us found it elsewhere, and I was not aware of my role in this situation. Shell's youngest daughter left for college, and you were preoccupied with other matters. Perhaps she felt old and lost. Mary suggested that this might be the case, but she should have discussed it with me instead of marrying someone else. Otherwise, he was a complete jerk, a thief, and so on. I retorted, what would you have done if she had confided in you about feeling lost or tempted? I would have tried to help, maybe sought counseling, I replied. But it was already too late. I think I admitted as much. So, if you stray, you can't stay. Mary summarized, for me, it's crucial. I kept my promise until she left me, I said firmly. It's a clear boundary. But what if it was just a one-time thing? She inquired about the nature of the incident, suggesting that it might have been a drunken mistake. However, she did not provide a clear answer as to why she had acted in such a manner. In reality, her actions were unacceptable. I suggested that we continue the discussion at a later date. Mary proposed that I was an intriguing woman and that our encounter had been completely unexpected. She expressed interest in meeting with me again. I agreed, assuming that she was not too tired. She teased me, smiling. We set a time to meet again, as it was already 4 p.m. I decided to go home. Upon my arrival, Clara was seated on the porch, perusing a book. We exchanged brief greetings and then proceeded to retire to our respective chambers. Approximately 90 minutes later, we prepared a meal of roasted potatoes, spring onions, and ground lamb with various spices. The meal was quite palatable. I informed Clara of the hearing, although we were almost completely unclothed as we cooked and ate. I observed Clara's unclothed body and inquired as to whether we could engage in a serious discussion. She promptly donned a t-shirt. Certainly. Let us converse. What is on your mind? I recently attended a session with a therapist. Following the hearing, I informed her of our recent developments. She suggested that our relationship exhibited characteristics of sexual hypercompatibility, indicating that we are sexually obsessed with each other. She did not believe that our relationship was merely a rebound for me, despite my recent divorce. I have also been curious about that possibility. Clara admitted that it was peculiar how we could not seem to get enough of each other. She suggested that it was as if we were addicted to each other. At this moment, I would be willing to act promptly and decisively. This is a phenomenon that I have not previously experienced. I must make decisions regarding Shelley's divorce and related matters. I continued, she returned to Pittsburgh, but not to her new partner. She mentioned having a lease and a job after I informed her that our relationship was over. It appears that she may be seeking something in Pittsburgh. Clara, I am unable to confirm this with certainty. I responded that, if our relationship is genuine, I am unwilling to terminate it. However, I am still adjusting to the idea of being divorced. I am seeking to gain a deeper understanding of you before making any long-term decisions. I would like to know you better. That seems like a reasonable request. What would you like to know? Clara inquired. I provided answers. She shared her background, including her upbringing in the suburbs, her college experience, and her time living with a partner in that environment. After graduation, she obtained her nursing degree and found a job in this area, where she met and married a gynecologist. She described him as skilled at both digital and physical forms of pleasure. She indicated that this was his primary talent. Despite her contentment with their life together, he was unfaithful to me with a woman from our neighborhood. He was not circumspect when I discovered this. I confronted him. He apologized and requested pardon. I elected to remain in the marriage, but this was an erroneous decision. Approximately 1 year later, he was unfaithful once more. I received a substantial settlement in the divorce. He relocated his practice to New York, and I have not seen him since. It has been 5 years since I have been in a relationship. I have engaged in brief romantic encounters and a sexual relationship with a friend last year, until he relocated to Thailand. I am not planning to pursue a relationship abroad. When we met at the gym, I inquired about the duration of her most recent relationship. She informed me that it had been almost a month and the experience was not fulfilling. Fortunately, I have access to a vibrator. She responded, well, now you. I inquired whether she had been intimate with another person recently. In response, she leaned over and kissed me, inadvertently interrupting our conversation. As we lay in bed later on, we continued our discussion. She inquired about my life and I provided a detailed account, focusing more on my early years since she was already familiar with recent events. Eventually, we fell asleep, as it seemed that our bodies had reached their limit. In the following days, our intimate activities resumed, though at a somewhat reduced intensity. I returned to see Mary Stevens, who inquired about the new relationship. I informed her that the intimacy was enjoyable but not as frequent. Additionally, Clara had a keen interest in baseball and was knowledgeable about it. I recounted our conversations about our past lives. I indicated that it would require a significant investment of time to gain a comprehensive understanding of Clara, but I was keen to pursue this. We proceeded to explore my marriage in greater depth. Mary emphasized the importance of allowing me to process my emotional response over time. She then prompted me to consider my feelings towards Dr. Connor. I realized that I had not devoted much thought to him previously. However, upon reflection, I experienced a strong sense of anger. Sentiments can be condensed into 3 words, drawn and quartered. I confessed. Mary chuckled. She had always found that phrase intriguing, though quite gruesome. Given my current state, the concept of drawing and quartering seems oddly satisfying. I assume they performed it on a live person initially. Indeed, I am curious how you are so knowledgeable about it. Do not inquire further. I am merely an ordinary individual with emotions that are irrelevant in this context. She responded, still smiling. You are aware that had it not been for Clara, I might have extended an invitation to you. I suspect you deliberately orchestrated that demonstration, and it was remarkably effective. For your information, I believe you were aware. In fact, I have always possessed a talent for such actions. However, as your therapist, I am obliged to refrain from such actions. We concluded our session, but I scheduled another appointment for 2 weeks later. I served Shell with the divorce papers, she had her own lawyer, and the divorce process proceeded smoothly. Since we did not have any young children, it took approximately 8 months to finalize. Shell was still living in Pittsburgh on an occasional basis. We conversed via telephone, and during one such conversation, I mentioned Clara. She seemed subdued when I brought her up. That girl always had her eye on you. I could see it. I feel like such a fool. She admitted, visibly upset. As for Clara, she moved in with me after I purchased her portion of the house. Our sexual compatibility became consistent, and I expressed my love. Despite Clara's desire to start a family and her own lack of children, I was uncertain about the idea of marriage due to my past experiences. At the age of 37, Clara decided to stop taking birth control, despite my conflicted feelings. She was able to persuade me through our intimate moments, and I eventually came to accept the idea of starting a family. I was delighted when Clara informed me of her pregnancy. This unexpected turn of events added excitement to our relationship and enhanced our sexual connection beyond what I had previously believed to be possible. Our daughter, Linda, was born just a few days after Clara and I were married in a judge's chambers. The ceremony was a small affair, attended only by close family members, including Clara's parents and mine. My children from a previous marriage, Shelley, remarried, surprisingly, to a pediatrician she met at a convention in Dallas. I hope she is happy, although I still hold some resentment toward her for her past actions. Despite that, everything turned out well for me, so holding on to a grudge seems unnecessary. However, perhaps just a bit. As for Connor, I did not take any action. He ultimately brought about his own downfall. The last I heard, he had become insolvent, lost his medical license, and ended up working at a gas station in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Clara and I now have 2 children together, Linda and Stephen, named after her father, who is a wonderful person. Our compatibility remains strong, and I have faith that it will continue that way indefinitely.